Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check them out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
Alright, welcome back to Twisted Tales, folks. Now, tonight's tale, I wanted to do a part 2 of that earlier episode I did there, my teenagers episode, because I like doing that one there. It's just a little bit of a switcheroo here, because mostly you hear stories about, parents killing their kids. So I decided to switch it up, so we'll talk about kids that killed their parents. There's a few other episodes here, and it's pretty cool. You don't hear too much of this pretty often. And if I don't tell you these tales, somebody else is gonna, right? So let's get back to it here. My first little tale. We're gonna start off with a guy named Barry Dale Lukaitis. So this happened here back in February 2nd of 1996. Now this one here is gonna be about a school shooting. So this was done by a 14-year-old at the time, Barry Dale. Now he was born February 26th, 1981, and this guy here ended up killing his algebra teacher and 2 other students at Frontier Middle School in Moses Lake, Washington. So this guy ended up walking from his house to the school, then he entered the algebra class around 5th period here, and then he shot some people. All the other students began to run and scatter and everything, and he quoted a Stephen King book called Rage. So he said aloud, "This sure beats algebra class, doesn't it?" And that right there is just wild. This, he had this whole planned out, right? If he has that quote in his head, it's something that he thought about doing, he read that book or whatever, right? Because that book there tells the tale of a guy named Charlie Decker, and he one day goes into school, he shoots his algebra teacher, and he holds the students hostage. And it's the same scenario as this, right? Now this book here was published back in 1977. So back to 1996 here. So a little before this juvenile shooter walked into this school, he was dressed up like some old type of gunslinger. He had 2 concealed pistols, 78 rounds of ammo, and a high-powered rifle. So this is what this guy walked into that school with, right? So, you can't say, he didn't mean to do any of this shit, right? Now, this guy's first victims here were 2 14-year-old kids. There was Manuel Vela and Arnold Fritz. Now, both those kids fell victim to his gunshots. Another student, 13-year-old Natalie Hintz. She sustained critical gunshot wounds to the right arm, the abdomen, and then she had to be airlifted to Harborview Medical Center up in Seattle. So then he walked into his algebra class. He shot his teacher, Leona Cares, fatally. And then he thought he was all badass by quoting that line from the book, right? So a teacher named John Lane, he entered the classroom after hearing the gunshots. He saw the students being held hostage. So he was going to go up and then, kind of offer himself up instead of the kids. And good for him for doing that shit, right? Trying to keep the students from further harm and shit, right? So he was held at gunpoint, and then Lane ended up grabbing the gun. He wrestled the kid to the ground, and then he just held him there until police came and the kids got out of there. Now, the kid that did the shooting here, he had some mental issues. The family was just a tad dysfunctional, and the parents had separated in 1995 because the husband was having an affair. I know, juicy details, right? Now, Barry's mom, Joanne Phillips, she was just batshit fucking domineering. So, she would often speak about suicide, and she would tell Barry that he would also have to kill himself and do a double suicide here. So this would take place on Valentine's Day in 1996. So that's the kind of fun things that they did together, right? Kind of bummer about that, I guess. But I mean, Barry told her, like, hey, why don't you write down your feelings instead of acting on them? That's actually advice that he probably should have taken up himself, right? So I mean, this shit shouldn't have happened to begin with. Because I mean, school is actually supposed to be like a place where you go to learn to progress later in life, not to go so you can be fucking shot. And it was believed here that the kid also had like a little bit of depression, he had hyperactivity, and he was taking Ritalin at the time of the shooting. So he claimed his only intent was to kill Manuel Vela, and the other deaths had been accidental. But I mean, if that were true, he wouldn't have fucking shot that other kid, that 13-year-old girl who was airlifted, and he wouldn't have quoted the book to the teacher after that, right? So he had some shit going on, man. He definitely planned this out, I think. Nobody bought this kid's crock of shit to begin with. So trial began in June of 1996, and he was then 15 years old. So the thing to do now was to decide whether he should be tried as an adult or a juvenile. So they had some shrinks come in during all this. They talked to him on mental health. And then this case had like such a high media publicity, they ended up moving the trial over to Seattle, Washington. And this chucklehead here pled insanity on all charges against him. So good for him. He tried to tell them about like mood swings and shit like that had been the cause of all the violence. No, it was him, right? So it was argued that like he carefully planned the shootings and everything, and like he definitely did, because he rolled up in the fucking school like looking like a goddamn Wild West character. So people started talking, saying that like he got the idea from like songs like Jeremy by Pearl Jam, Natural Born Killers the movie, and the Stephen King book. And nobody really gave a shit about that either. And then they went on with the case. Because I mean, like, I've listened to Pearl Jam on numerous occasions, right? Natural Born Killers, I've seen that a million times, and I've read books way worse than that Stephen King one. And, like, I've never went out and did any of this shit, so, I mean, just take accountability for your actions, kid. Now, September 24th, 97, he was convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of second-degree, and then 1 count of first-degree attempted murder, and then 16 counts of aggravated kidnapping for all the kids that he held at gunpoint. Now, Numbnuts was sentenced to 2 life terms for his actions, and then an additional 205 years without the possibility of parole. So he's currently imprisoned at Clallam Bay up in Washington State. So it's also a little known fact here that back in 2012, people who were convicted of murder when they were under the age of 18 could not receive automatic life terms without parole. So he was resentenced to 189 years back in 2017. It was retroactively applied back in 2016 here. So, yeah, fuck that kid. So, I want to go back here to the Natalie girl here that had been critically injured in that shooting. She had settled a lawsuit there against the Moses Lake School Board, and like no sum was disclosed or anything. So she got some money out of the whole ordeal here, and she's now married with a kid. The family of Arnold Fritz also reached a settlement too. So after the incident here, Natalie had ended up talking to the press. So she said, quote, "God has been great to me. I'm alive." Now her right arm was nearly severed by the shootings and will most likely suffer permanent damage to her right hand and her fingers. Now the family praised up those who had offered up sympathy to the family. So they were very, happy with how everything turned out at the end, right? Now the bullet also nearly severed a portion of her liver, and repairs needed to be made to her diaphragm and her chest. Also, when she was rushed over to the hospital here, they actually had to get her under surgery rather quickly, and she was under for like 12 hours. Now, Barry did make a statement here. He apologized to the families and the girl that he injured. But words can't repair that shit, right? Some had also mentioned, like, how the resentencing was, like, wicked painful to, like, go through and all that. And I totally get that. Nobody wanted to rehash that shit again, right? So, that's my little tale on this guy and his school shooting. So what I'll do now is I'll add a little clip here and tell you guys about that. And then I'll move on with my next tale.
Before the judge handed down Barry Lukaitis' sentence, many of the victims spoke in court here today. Many of the victims said they never thought they would have to be back in court to relive this tragedy. The woman who was shot by Lukaitis in the classroom and survived said, "Your sentence was supposed to be final, like death is final." The courtroom was filled with emotion today as everyone had to relive the moment that forever changed their lives. It's a moment they never thought they'd have to recount in court. As the victims spoke, they asked we not show their faces.
It took a long time before the images and experiences of that 2-hour period weren't there, just flashing before my eyes.
Words cannot express the pain and anguish my family has endured. His decision to take the life of my child without regard to human life is unbelievable.
Each person who spoke talked about all of the memories and life events they will never get to experience with their loved ones because of Lukaitis' actions. Natalie Heinz, who was shot by Lukaitis and survived, says she's reminded daily of the tragedy.
I feel sick thinking about the life I could have lived, the missed opportunities, and the daily struggles I've had.
Lukaitis broke down in tears as some of the victims shared their stories. He also addressed the court for the first time.
You all deserve your lives the way they were, and I never do that. I never bring that back. I'm sorry for what I did to one of our tires. I'm sorry for what I did to Mary Vela. I'm sorry for what I did to your son, Archibald.
Lukaitis also, for the first time, tried to answer the question of why.
The short answer is that I was afraid, I was angry, and I was jealous. That's not a full explanation, but I was in a situation where I was going through the same things that every other kid did, and I didn't see it.
After the shooting happened, Manuel Vela, one of the victims of the shooting, was painted as a bully. Today in court, Lukaitis finally admitted that wasn't the case and said Manuel was a good person. Manuel's father, Manny, says if anything good came out of today, it was that his son's name was finally cleared.
That's the best thing that could have come out of all of this is him saying what we've known all along, that he was not a bully, that he was not the bad example that he was first set out to be.
Next up, we'll talk about Craig Chandler Price. So this fella here was born October 11th, 1973. He committed his crimes when he was between the ages of 13 and 15. So this was up in Warwick, Rhode Island. So when he was 13, he committed his first murder on July 27th, 1987. Now he broke into a house a few doors down from his. He grabbed a knife from the old kitchen, and he stabbed 27-year-old Rebecca Spencer 58 times, killing her, and she was a mother of 2. 2 years later, in 1989, he killed another neighbor, and this was Joan Heaton, so he got her 63 times. She was actually stabbed with the same kitchen knife set that she had bought earlier that day, so it's fucking stupid. He also killed her 2 little kids. Jennifer was 10 and Melissa was 8. They were both found in pools of blood. Pieces of the knives were broke off into their bones, and I believe Jennifer was stabbed somewhere between 62 times. So the whole neighborhood was just fucking in an uproar, right? They couldn't even begin to process all this violence that was breaking out around them, right? So, like, there was a little bit of panic that was setting in, right? And by the time this guy was 15, he was in, like, a little bit of trouble with the law for, like, minor stuff, burglary, and nothing major, right? But police became suspicious after, they noticed that he had lied to them. And this was about a gash that was on his finger. So they started thinking and looking back at the crime scene. Now the kid, he had big feet too. They were size 13 to be exact. So there was like a bloody sock print that was found at the scene. It was exactly that size. And they ended up searching this kid's house, and they found the kitchen set of knives in his backyard shed. So they hauled him into the station, and he confessed to the murders. So this Price kid here was like only a month shy of his 16th birthday, so that would have actually changed some of this stuff around here. And he would soon be released here from the Youth Correctional Center when he turned 21. And the maximum penalty under the Rhode Island law at that time was because, like, when you're young, like when you're a young adult, you can start your life over at like 21, right? But the ones that he murdered, like, they didn't even get to go on with their lives and do everything that they did now, right? So when this kid got caught, he would just be in fucking jail for like a couple years, and then he'd be out, right? Now, during this guy's like confession here with police, it was mentioned that he had no remorse for his actions. So what the system kind of did here, because of all that like getting released at 21 shit, so they kind of pushed for a law here. So this was done by like the court guys and whatever. So they wanted a law to be passed that allowed juveniles to be tried in adult court for serious crimes. So this was shot around by the media and whatnot, and everything got kind of situated with this. I mean, everybody was going on like the guy already paid his dues to society, and eventually he was just sentenced to 15 years, and then he spent his 21st birthday behind bars. I mean, after his 21, he would actually move to an adult correctional facility. So, like, over time, the state just kept adding time on for this guy, so while he was in prison for, like, fighting and shit, they'd pin that on him. They would find stuff from, like, his earlier refusals to submit, like, psychiatric testing. That brought on, like, another 1-year sentence in itself. So, he ended up being transferred a few times for being violent. He went from Rhode Island to Florida, and in Florida, he had a fight with another inmate there, a corrections officer, and another inmate. So, he was stabbed in the finger by a shiv here, so then he was transferred again. So yeah, kind of crazy here. I mean, even in 2017, like, the accused, he was accused of stabbing a fucking inmate here, Joshua Davis. This was up in that Live Oak facility in Florida, and he actually had a 5-inch homemade knife. So he was sentenced to 25 years for that on January 2019. So this guy will never get out of jail, folks. So that's a really good thing, because, fuck, he started killing at a young age, and obviously his violence never calmed out, like, through old prison or whatever, right? Or calmed down, I mean. So, yeah, good for society and the judicial system for keeping this guy in jail. Next up, we're going to travel over to Airdrie, North Lanarkshire. So this will be back in 2018. Now this one revolves around a 16-year-old named Aaron Campbell and a 6-year-old named Alicia McPhail. So this guy here, he ended up snatching this 6-year-old girl from her bed, and she was over visiting her grandparents and her dad at the Isle of Bute. Now this is an island in the Firth of Clyde in Scotland, United Kingdom. Has a population of a little over 6,500. Now this dude had entered their unlocked home around 2 a.m. on July 2nd, 2018. So he was coming back from a party, he wanted some drugs. The party ended at midnight, and friends remember him kind of being like a little bit of a dick. He was a little bit depressed over that. So he sent out a couple messages to see if he could score a little bit of pot. Now he messaged Robert McPhail. This was Alicia's father. Now, this kid had bought off him before, so like he messaged him at 1:47 a.m. and then he called him at 1:48 a.m. The kid got no response, and then the wheel started to kind of turn, so he concocted a plan. Now he decided to sneak into their house just to steal whatever weed that he could find, whatever he thought would be there, right? And then he'd be out of there lickety-split. Now, he broke in pretty quickly. He knew the layout of the house anyway. He'd been there before, right? He didn't want to wake anybody up. Now, he did, however, notice little Alicia asleep in her room. So he went into her room, he lifted her from her bed, and he left unnoticed. Now, during this, she woke up and asked who he was. Now, Campbell replied with, "I'm just taking you home." And then he carried the poor girl over to like a secluded area here. This was down the shoreline. And he killed the poor girl. And then he disposed of like his clothes and stuff in the sea there. Now, the next morning, 6 a.m., July 2nd, Callum MacPhail, the grandfather, had woke up to check on his granddaughter. And she wasn't in her bed, or anywhere in the house for that matter. And then the police were notified around 6:23 a.m. The family ended up searching the area. Everyone was kind of panicking. Others were going around to spread the word of to tell folk to be on the lookout and shit. So they made a Facebook post here, and the town was notified to help in any way. Now, Alicia's dad, Robert, had noticed the messages and the missed call from Aaron Campbell. Now, Campbell responded with, "Sorry, doesn't matter," when the dad tried to phone him. And then he asked him, hey, keep an eye out for his daughter. And he replied back with, "Oh, damn, I'm sure she's not went too far." Now, a search was made up, and the police service of Scotland there started looking for the little girl. And they'd even brought in a helicopter. Now, later on, a Coast Guard volunteer had began searching the shoreline. And the area was searched, and they found a knife around this shoreline. And then that Facebook post that was made, they wanted to use that to get help, but it kind of went a different way here, because the public now had an update on it. It now appeared that the naked, lifeless body of Alicia had now been found near a wooded area near a former hotel. Now, the mother, Georgina, she had found out about her daughter's death from a fucking Facebook post. And that's how this world is now. And she was actually like 110 kilometers away there. Now, an autopsy was done on July 3rd, 2018, and this revealed some serious shit. The injuries that she received had totaled the number of 117, so it was 117 injuries that she had, some of which had been caused when she was alive, and then there were injuries when she was dead. Now, injuries to her neck and her face, her nose, and her mouth indicated that she had been suffocated, and her genitals sustained catastrophic injuries. Her cause of death, the result of significant forceful pressure to the neck and face. So this guy just did the absolute worst to this poor little girl. The mother of Aaron Campbell, her name was Jeanette. Now, she was overwhelmed by the missing girl. When everybody found out what happened to her, right, the whole town was just fucking dumbfounded. So she had checked the security footage to see if she could see anybody outside the home or anything, right? Because, late at night, what would somebody be doing out, right? And she did see someone that night on her video footage. This was of her son leaving and returning twice that same night that the little girl had disappeared. So she grilled him on this and asked him questions, but he didn't really say too much. And then she reported the footage to police and then handed it over. He was then interviewed by Constable Gavin McKellar, to which Aaron played along with. He kind of cooperated to the officer's questions, shit like that. And it said here he's pretty chill throughout all this. There were no signs of worry, anything like that. And on July 4th, he was taken to a station in Glasgow, and he was arrested on suspicion of murder. And then DNA evidence from the crime scene had connected the dots, and he was arrested. Any questions that they further asked him, he just answered no comment to. And the next day, he was actually charged with the rape and the murder of the little girl, Alicia MacPhail. Now, trial was set for 2018 at the High Court in Glasgow, and this would start December 10th. Now, he ended up not guilty plea to the charge of abducting, raping, and murdering this girl. And nobody really fucking cared about that. Now, a trial was then set for 2019 here. And they had enough evidence now to convict this punk. So he was handed a life sentence with a minimum term of 27 years. And they had this guy dead to rights. I mean, they had camera footage of him that night. He left around, 1:54 a.m., and then he was back at 3:35 a.m., and then he left, and then he returned again at 4:07 a.m. Now, it's said here that he actually, forgot his cell phone back at the crime scene, so he went back for that. Other members of the public had checked their surveillance feeds as well, and they picked up an individual walking around with holding something in his arms. Other evidence there that police found were a fleece jacket, jogging bottoms, boxer shorts, a t-shirt, and a kitchen knife. So all those clothes that this kid had thought would magically disappear in the ocean actually washed up back on sea here. They had also found some fibers there on her trousers, from his trousers onto her pajamas. And it's also noted here that Aaron had also used his cell phone for some Google searches. There was a couple questions. How do police find DNA? And collecting DNA evidence, that was another thing that he had asked. And there was a 16-year-old girl that had testified that Aaron had made a Snapchat video that was sent to 25 people. And then it had the caption, found the guy who has done it. So they had enough shit to lock this kid away for a long time, right? So, you never know, he might get killed in jail over all this. And in 2019, he appealed his sentence, and this reduced his term from 27 years down to 24. So when this guy rolls in 2042, he can then be eligible to apply for parole. And for now, or whatever, I guess he's held at the HM Young Offenders Institute, Polmont, until he's 21, and then he'll be moved to an adult prison. So, yeah, hopefully this guy never sees the light of day, and what a terrible tragedy this whole thing was, right? All over just gonna go look for some weed. If I just don't find any weed, I just go to sleep, and I don't know, some people just take it to the extreme, and it sucks, and this is the world that we live in. And I guess I got another one here. We're going to talk about Lowell Lee Andrews. Let's blast this one off here. So this guy was born September 21st, 1940, and he died November 30th, 1962. So he was a sophomore at the University of Kansas. Now, he was convicted of the murders of his parents and his sister on November 28th, 1958. So he ended up getting executed over this. And he grew up in Wolcott, Kansas. Now, he played the bassoon up in college there, and the newspaper at one point even dubbed this kid as the nicest boy in Wolcott. Oh, how wrong they'd be on that one. But this kid here had different dreams than you or I had growing up, right? He dreamt of being a gangster, a hitman. Not the normal, kid fantasy of being, a doctor or, a fireman or a policeman or something like that, right? Now, this all shook down Thanksgiving back in 1958. So, Andrews and his sister were both home for the holidays. His sister's name was Jenny Marie. So, she was downstairs watching TV with her folks. Andrew was upstairs reading a book. So, when he finished, he went out, he shaved, he put on a suit, and then he went downstairs carrying a .22 caliber rifle and a revolver. He shot his sister between the eyes, killing her with a single shot, and then he put 6 bullets into his mom and 7 into his old man. His dad died crawling to the kitchen for safety. And then, as if nothing had happened, the kid went to a movie, he tossed the guns in a river, and then he returned home. And then he notified police about the shootings. And the responding officers here, they kind of grew suspicious because he just seemed so emotionless. Now, a family minister who would stop by, he actually got a confession from the kid. Now, it was said that the kid felt 0 emotion when he killed his folks. And he said right here, "I'm not sorry, and I'm not glad I did it. I didn't even feel anything as they died." And he pled not guilty by reason of insanity. He was convicted and sentenced to death. So he was on death row at Lansing Correctional, and then he was executed by hanging November 30th, 1962, when he was 22 years old. Now, he had his last meal here. That consisted of 2 fried chickens. He had a side of mashed potatoes, green beans, and pie a la mode. And he never said anything when he died. He gave no last words. So, crazy tale there, eh, folks? Next up, we're going to talk about a guy named Shen Sahan. So this guy was in school back in 2014. Now, he was grabbing some lunch at the school cafeteria, and another student stepped on his shoes a few times, kind of scuffling them up, right? So he got very verbal with the guy, and then they were separated. And the guy kind of went "Why are you stepping on me, whatever?" And the other guy's he kind of gave a shit response, "I just like to step on things," and whatever, right? So the two ended up kind of being separated after being verbally fucking yelling at each other. And then when class ended, the classmate who had stepped on this guy was just itching to pick on anybody, right? So this guy here that was stepping on his shoes was named Lee Momo. Hope I said that right, but you never know. Now he met up with Shen a little later, and then Lee had grabbed Shen. He drug him down a bunch of stairs, and there was a group of Lee's friends there. So there was a few others that stood by to watch. Now Chen knew that he had to fight this guy, or it would be shown as a sign of weakness, and then more bullying would soon follow. Right? This is how this fucking world works now. It always kind of went like this, even when I was a kid, right? So he had no time for this punk, all these little gangster friends, so he took his beating, whatever. He got beat up a little bit this time. And he couldn't stand up under his own power at this time, so they kind of left him there, right? So after school, they ended up grabbing poor Chan again, and then Lee and his little cronies here, they brought him to an alley. And this was a bad time. They realized, we're just gonna kick the shit out of this kid, right? Chen knew they were gonna fucking kill him or whatever. So an onlooker from the crowd handed this guy, a knife here. And, a little thin knife here. So he gave him that, and then the fight was on. So he was beaten again a little bit by Lee, and then Chen took the knife from his left hand and he stabbed Lee. But when he quickly stabbed him, Lee actually, out of survival instinct, he fucking stabbed Shen, and then he was seriously injured too. But the classmate Lee had unfortunately died due to his injuries. Now all Chen did was just protect himself, right? If he didn't, he surely would have died. The damage was already done now. And in 2014, the courts had found him at fault, and they sentenced him to 8 years in prison. And since he was under 18 at the time, he served his sentence at a juvenile correctional center, to which many expressed their feelings of injustice done against him. Think about it, the guy was already hurting, he was bullied, and he stood up for himself, right? So, he did kill someone to protect himself, but even the parents had tried to get the kid's sentence reduced. So this now 15-year-old kid would now begin his sentence here, so everything would just become real. So he spent his time in prison here. While he was doing that, classmates wrote to him to keep his spirits up. They gave him encouragement to help get him through and everything, right? There was one of the officers inside. He actually taught him how to jam on the guitar and stuff. This was his first few years in. And then in 2019, he graduated in prison. He received his junior college diploma in criminal law. And then in August 2020, Shen was released on good behavior, and then he pretty much only spent 6 years at the detention center. And then he returned to society here, and now he can move forward with his life. He did say this, however, loneliness only lasts for a moment, and I am used to loneliness. Everything will pass, and life will always get better day by day. And nice little tale, I guess. I mean, what do you do, right? I mean, it's going to be self-defense things, right? So. And with that, folks, I think that's a wrap here. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning back into Twisted Tales, and I'll pop some more stuff your way. I'm working on that Kenley case still. Just work's been work. And then, yeah, so I appreciate you guys tuning in here and listening to all my random shit. You guys are awesome. I'll throw in a couple of my buddies' podcast links here and a few bands from Spotify that are on here. They're all pretty good, so check them out, man. It doesn't hurt to give these guys a follow. Because that way, it helps them, it gets them known. You know, if somebody follows this guy, they share their shit, they follow this. It's just a trend, so keep it all going. I love you guys. Have a wicked night.
Welcome to the Dead Podcast. I'm your host, Desi, and on this podcast, I discuss all things spooky and weird, from ghosts, demons, religion, to folklore, urban legends, true crime, and all things paranormal, with some horror movie reviews sprinkled in. So join me on this spooky ride.
Twisted Tales.